People often say blood is thicker than water, but for me, family had a price tag of exactly $2,300. That was the cost my mother set for me to buy a seat in her perfect family on the day my brother graduated. She thought I would just hand over my credit card like always, but this time, I refused. Instead, I turned that party into a graveyard for their 20 years of lies. My name is Eliana Woodcroft. If you looked at my resume, or perhaps the freshly printed business card sitting on my mahogany desk, you would see a woman who had it all figured out. At 27 years old, I had just been named the creative director at Nebula Horizons, one of the most prestigious advertising agencies in the city. The view from my new office was a sprawling grid of steel and glass, a testament to sleepless nights, skipped meals, and a relentless drive that I had cultivated not out of ambition, but out of necessity. My colleagues had spent the morning patting my back, popping champagne corks, and telling me how much I deserved this. The air in the office smelled of victory and expensive coffee. Yet, as the sun began to dip below the skyline, casting long, melancholy shadows across my floor, the silence from my personal phone was deafening. There were no messages from home, no missed calls from my parents to scream in delight that their daughter had broken a glass ceiling before she even hit 30. There was only the low hum of the air conditioning and the gnawing realization that in the Woodcroft family, my achievements were invisible. They always had been. I was the ghost haunting the periphery of their perfect portrait, the background noise to the main event, and the main event was always Julian. To understand why I sat there, clutching a glass of lukewarm water instead of celebrating, you have to understand the dynamic that had ruled my life for over 2 decades. I grew up in a house where resources were theoretically finite for me, but miraculously infinite for my younger brother. I wore clothes that had been passed down from cousins or bought from thrift store racks, the fabric thinning at the elbows and knees. I worked 2 jobs through high school, one at a diner that smelled permanently of grease and burnt coffee, and another shelving books at the library, just to save for a car that wouldn't break down every 10 miles. My parents, Robert and Patricia, applauded my independence. They called it character building. But when Julian came along, the philosophy of character building evaporated. Julian, my 25-year-old brother, was the golden boy. He was handsome in a way that made people forgive his lack of substance. With a charming smile that he used as currency, while I was scrubbing tables to pay for my SAT prep books, Julian was enrolled in a private preparatory school that cost more per semester than I made in a year. The irony was that Julian barely scraped by with C- averages. While I brought home straight A's that were met with a distracted nod, he was always described by my mother as a future entrepreneur, a title that seemed to justify his lack of employment and his abundance of expensive hobbies. He had never held a real job. He had never felt the panic of an overdraft fee. He lived in the safety net my parents had woven from their retirement savings and, occasionally, my own guilt. The vibration of my phone against the glass desktop snapped me out of my reverie. The screen lit up with the name, Mom, for a fleeting, foolish second. My heart jumped. Had someone told her? Had she seen my update on social media? Was she calling to finally say the words I had been starving for? I picked up, forcing a cheerful tone into my voice. "Hi, Mom." Eliana. Her voice came through, not warm, but brisk and businesslike. It was the tone of a project manager addressing a subordinate. "Are you sitting down? I have wonderful news." "I actually have some news too," I started, the words bubbling up in my throat. "I just got promoted to—" She cut me off as if I hadn't spoken. "Julian is finally graduating. Can you believe it? My baby boy is going to be a college graduate." The words died on my tongue. The excitement I had been harboring turned into a cold lump in my stomach. "Oh, that is great. Mom, really, when is the ceremony?" "Next Saturday," she said, her voice dripping with a pride she had never wasted on me. "But the ceremony is just the formality. We are throwing him a party, a real celebration. We have booked the private room at the Golden Swan." I blinked, staring at the city lights blurring in front of my eyes. The The Golden Swan was not just a restaurant. It was an institution of wealth. It was the kind of place where the water menu had prices, and the napkins were made of Egyptian cotton. It was a place for senators and CEOs, not for a family that constantly complained about the rising cost of utilities. The Golden Swan? I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. That sounds expensive. Mom, are you sure that is within the budget? It has to be perfect. Eliana, she snapped, defensive immediately. This is a milestone. Julian has worked so hard. He has been under so much pressure lately with his finals. He deserves to be celebrated in a way that befits his future status. We invited the entire extended family, and your father even invited some of his old business partners. We need to show them that the Woodcroft name means something. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Okay, well, I am happy for him. I will check my calendar. But I think I can make it. Make it? You are not just a guest. Eliana, you are his sister. There was a pause, a heavy silence that I knew too well. It was the silence that preceded a demand. Actually, I am glad you picked up. I just emailed you the invoice for the deposit. My brows furrowed. I pulled the phone away from my ear and tapped on my email app. Sure enough, a message from Patricia Woodcroft sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Julian's Big Day. Contribution. I opened the attachment. It was an invoice from the Golden Swan. My eyes scanned down to the total, and then to the highlighted section my mother was referencing. Mom, I said, my voice hardening. Why did you send me this? Well, she began, her tone shifting to that breezy, manipulative cadence she used when she wanted something. Your father and I have covered the rental of the room and the main course, which was astronomical, let me tell you. But we need you to handle the rest. It is just the alcohol package and the floral arrangements. It is a small part of the whole thing. Really. I looked at the number again. Mom, this is $2,300. Is it? She feigned ignorance. I did not look at the exact figure, but that sounds right for premium wine and orchids. Julian loves orchids. $2,300. The number echoed in my head. It was not a small amount. It was a significant sum. But it was not just the money. It was the principle. It was the audacity. A memory clawed its way to the surface, unbidden and sharp. 5 years ago, my own graduation from the state university. I had graduated magna cum laude, working full-time the entire 4 years to minimize my loans. I remembered walking across the stage, scanning the crowd for my parents, and seeing them checking their watches. Afterwards, I had asked if we could go to dinner. My father had sighed, complaining about his back, and my mother had said they were too tired. On the ride home, in the back seat of their car, hunger had gnawed at my stomach. We stopped at a gas station for fuel. My mother had tossed a plastic-wrapped package into my lap. Here, she had said. Congratulations. It was a blueberry muffin, not a bakery muffin, a processed, preservative-laden muffin from a convenience store shelf. It had cost maybe $2. That was the value they placed on my 4 years of sleepless nights and academic excellence. $2 and a distinct lack of eye contact. And now, for Julian. Julian, who had taken 7 years to finish a 4-year degree. Julian, who had failed more classes than I had ever taken. They wanted $2,300 from me for wine and flowers. Eliana, are you still there? Her voice was impatient now. I am here, I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. Mom, I cannot pay this. What do you mean you cannot? The sweetness vanished instantly, replaced by the sharp edge of a woman scorned. You have that fancy job. You are single. What could you possibly be spending your money on? I am saving, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I told you this. I am closing on an apartment next month. I need every dollar for the down payment and the closing costs. I cannot just drop $2,300 on a party. An apartment? She scoffed. You can buy an apartment anytime. Julian only graduates once. This is his moment. Eliana, do not make this about you. I am not making it about me, I countered, feeling the old, familiar frustration bubbling up. It was the feeling of screaming underwater. I am making it about my finances. I am not asking you to pay for my apartment. I am just saying I cannot pay for his party. Why doesn't Julian pay for it? Or why don't you scale back? Why does it have to be the Golden Swan? Because he is special, she shouted, losing her composure. He is the future of this family. We have to launch him properly. You should be honored to contribute. You should want to help your brother succeed. I helped him succeed when I proofread his essays in high school, I said. I helped him succeed when I lent him money for books last semester that he never paid back. I am done paying, Mom. You are being incredibly selfish. She spat out the word like a curse. It was her favorite weapon. If I had boundaries, I was selfish. If I had needs, I was selfish. After everything we have done for you, we put a roof over your head. We raised you. You raised me to be independent, I reminded her. So let me be independent with my money. It is not just money, Eliana. It is loyalty. It is duty. Her voice dropped to a low, guilt-inducing whisper. Sisterhood means supporting each other. He is the pride of our lineage. If you do not do this, you are telling us exactly where you stand. You are telling us that your little apartment is more important than your brother's happiness, more important than the family's reputation. I looked out the window again. The city was dark now, a sea of twinkling lights. I felt incredibly alone. I was a creative director. I managed a team of 20 people. I controlled budgets worth millions. Yet, in the face of this woman's voice, I felt like that little girl in the thrift store clothes, apologizing for existing. I am not paying $2,300, Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly but holding firm. I will come to the party, I will bring a gift, but I am not paying for the party. We will see about that, she said, her tone icy and ominous. You have a week to change your mind. Do not disappoint us. Eliana, we have already told everyone that you are handling the beverages. Do not make us look like liars. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen going black. I sat there in the silence of my new office, the symbol of my success surrounding me, yet feeling more impoverished than I ever had in my life. The ghost of perfection, that image of the happy, successful Woodcroft family that my mother was so desperate to project, was haunting me. She wanted to build a shrine to Julian's mediocrity, and she wanted to use my bricks to do it. But as I looked at that invoice again, at the figure of $2,300 staring back at me, something shifted. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something hotter, something sharper. I remembered the muffin. I remembered the taste of stale blueberries and the dry texture that choked me as I ate it in the back of the car. Trying not to cry. They wanted a contribution? They wanted me to pay the price for admission into this family? I set the phone down on the mahogany desk. No, I whispered to the empty room, but I knew this wasn't over. My mother was not a woman who took no for an answer. She was a general in a war of appearances, and I had just deserted the front lines. The war was coming to me, whether I wanted it or not. I just didn't know yet how dirty they were willing to fight. The siege began less than an hour after my mother hung up. I had barely enough time to process the audacity of the invoice before my phone began to vibrate again, dancing across the mahogany surface of my desk like a trapped insect. This time, the caller ID displayed Dad, my father, Robert, was usually the silent partner in the Woodcroft enterprise. He was a man who preferred to sit in his armchair and let my mother conduct the orchestra of our family life, nodding at the right times and signing checks when instructed. For him to call me directly, especially during work hours, signaled a mobilization of forces that I was not prepared for. I took a deep breath, composed my professional mask, and answered. Hello, Dad? Eliana. His voice was heavy, lacking the sharp edge of my mother's but carrying a different kind of weight. The weight of disappointed authority. Your mother tells me you are causing trouble about the party. I am not causing trouble. I replied, keeping my tone even. I am just setting boundaries. I cannot afford $2,300 for wine. Dad, I have a mortgage approval pending. This isn't about money, Eliana. It is about face, he interrupted, his voice lowering as if he were sharing a state secret. Do you know who we have invited? I called the Hendersons. I invited my old partners from the firm. Your Uncle Marcus is flying in from Chicago. These are people who expect a certain standard. If the bar runs dry or the room looks cheap, it reflects on me. It reflects on all of us. Then maybe you should have budgeted for the standard you wanted to project, I said, the logic tasting bitter on my tongue. Why is my bank account the insurance policy for your reputation? Because you are part of this family, he snapped, his patience fraying. We sacrificed for you. We pushed you to be where you are. And now, when your brother finally crosses the finish line, you want to pinch pennies? This is Julian's moment. We need to present a united front. A successful front. If you embarrass us in front of the Hendersons, I will not forgive it. He hung up without waiting for a goodbye. The line went dead, but the assault was far from over. Within minutes, the text messages started arriving. It was a coordinated strike, a tactic my mother had perfected over the years. She would spin a narrative to the extended family, painting herself as the martyr and me as the villain, and then unleash them upon me. Aunt Linda. Heard you're refusing to help with Julian's big day. Really, Eliana? After all your parents did? Shame on you. Cousin Sarah. Julian is so excited. Don't ruin this for him. Family comes first. Even my grandmother, who barely knew how to use a smartphone, sent a string of broken emojis followed by, "Be a good sister. God watches the greedy." I stared at the screen, the blue bubbles accumulating like toxic waste. The accusation of greed was particularly rich, coming from people who had never once offered to help me when I was eating instant noodles to save for textbooks. But logic had no place here. This was emotional warfare, designed to suffocate me with guilt until I suffocated and surrendered my credit card number. I needed air. I stood up, grabbing my purse, and walked out of my office, past the celebrating colleagues who were still high on the news of my promotion. I felt like an imposter among them. To them, I was a rising star. To my family, I was nothing more than a stubborn wallet. I found a quiet corner in the building's atrium and dialed Julian. If I was going to be coerced into funding this extravaganza, I wanted to hear it from him. I wanted to hear him ask for it. What? Julian answered on the third ring. There was loud music in the background, the thump of bass and the clatter of what sounded like billiard balls. Hello to you too, Julian, I said dryly. I am getting a lot of heat about this party. Yeah, Mom said you were being a brat, he said, his voice slurring slightly. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I am not being a brat. I am being an adult with financial responsibilities. But listen, Julian, I am trying to wrap my head around this. If I am going to contribute, I want to write a speech, a really good one. A speech? He sounded suspicious. What kind of speech? A toast. To your hard work. I want to talk about your major, your thesis. Actually, could you send me a picture of your final transcript? Or your diploma if you have received it already? I want to quote your GPA or mention a specific class you excelled in. I want to make it personal. The line went silent. The background noise seemed to swell. The laughter of strangers. The clinking of glass. Why? Julian asked, his tone shifting from dismissive to defensive. You do not need to see my grades to say congratulations. I just want to be accurate, I pressed, feeling a strange prickle of intuition at the base of my neck. Mom says you worked so hard. I want to highlight that. Just snap a photo and text it to me. It will take 5 seconds. You do not believe me, he accused, his voice rising. That is what this is, isn't it? You think I'm stupid. You think I couldn't do it. I never said that. Julian, I just asked for... You are always like this. Always acting superior because you have your fancy job and your little awards. You just want to see my transcript so you can mock me if I didn't get straight A's like you. You are toxic. Eliana, just forget it. If you do not want to pay, fine, but do not insult me. He hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone, baffled. It was a simple request. Most graduates would be plastering their diplomas all over Instagram. Julian's reaction wasn't just annoyance, it was panic masked as anger. My phone rang almost immediately. It was my mother again. Julian must have called her the second he got off the line with me. "Stop harassing your brother," she screamed. I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "He is under enough pressure preparing for the ceremony without you interrogating him like a police officer. I just asked for a picture of his diploma." "Mom," I said, my voice calm but cold. "Why is that harassment?" "Because you are doing it to be mean," she retorted. "You are nitpicky. You are jealous that he is getting a party and you didn't. Just leave him alone. Do not ask him about school. He is stressed. Just pay the bill and show up and smile." "Is that so hard?" "I still haven't said I am paying," I reminded her. "We will discuss that later. Just stop upsetting him." She disconnected. The gaslighting was so potent I almost felt dizzy. I was being called the aggressor for asking a college graduate to see proof of his graduation. The air around me felt thick, heavy with unspoken secrets. Something was wrong. The intensity of their defense was disproportionate to the offense. I decided to grab a coffee before heading back upstairs. I needed caffeine to deal with the headache that was throbbing behind my eyes. I walked to the small artisan cafe across the street from my office building. It was busy, filled with the mid-afternoon rush of corporate drones seeking a lifeline. As I waited for my Americano, a voice called out from the line near the pickup counter. "Eliana? Eliana Woodcroft?" I turned. A woman with short, curly hair and glasses was waving at me. It took a moment for my brain to place her. Sarah. She had been a year below me in high school and, if I remembered correctly, had attended the same private university that Julian had been attending for the last 7 years. "Sarah, hi," I managed to smile. Walking over, "It has been years. How are you?" "I am good. I am working at the law firm down the block," she said, beaming. "I saw your LinkedIn update. Creative director. That is huge. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, genuinely warmed by the validation from a near stranger when my own family offered none. "You look great." "Hey," she said, her expression shifting to something more inquisitive. "I actually ran into your mom at the grocery store a few months ago. She said Julian is finally graduating this week?" "Yes," I said, watching her face closely. "We are excited." Sarah hesitated. She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "That is interesting. I mean, that is great. It is just—" "Just what?" I asked, my heart rate picking up. "Well," she lowered her voice, leaning in closer. "I finished my master's at the university last semester, and I was still on campus a lot. I have not seen Julian around in a long time. Eliana, at least 3 or 4 semesters. The last time I saw him was at a fraternity party, and he told people he was taking a gap year to work on a startup." "A startup?" I repeated. "He told us he was taking extra credits during the summer." Sarah bit her lip, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I probably shouldn't say anything. Maybe he was taking online classes? But the rumor around the comms department, and this is just a rumor, was that he had some trouble with academic probation a while back. A friend of mine who works in the registrar's office mentioned he had a hold on his account for unpaid fees and failing grades, but maybe he fixed it?" She saw the look on my face and quickly backtracked. "I am sure it is fine. If your mom is throwing a party, obviously he graduated. I probably just heard wrong. Ignore me." "No, Sarah," I said, my voice hollow. "Thank you, really." We exchanged pleasantries for another minute, but I didn't hear a word she said. I walked back to my office building in a daze, the coffee burning my hand through the cardboard sleeve. The pieces were floating in front of me, jagged and ugly, the refusal to show the transcript. Julian's defensiveness, my mother's ban on asking questions about school, the constant demands for money, and now, Sarah's information. Julian wasn't just a bad student. He might not be a student at all. I sat back down at my desk, looking at the city view that suddenly felt like a prison cell. If Julian hadn't graduated, what was this party? A charade? A delusion? My parents were capable of denial, but to rent the Golden Swan for a lie of this magnitude seemed insane, even for them, unless they knew. The thought chilled me to the bone. Did they know? Or were they being duped by Julian too? My phone rang again. Mom. I stared at it for 5 rings before answering. What is it now? Mom? I forgot to mention one detail, she said, her voice sickeningly sweet, as if she hadn't been screaming at me an hour ago. Since you are coming to the party, we need you to do a favor for your brother. We need you to pick him up and drive him to the venue. He has a car, I said. You bought him that Mustang 2 years ago. It is in the shop, she lied. I could hear the lie in the pause before she spoke. Besides, we want him to arrive in style. Your car, that German sedan you bought, looks much more executive. We want people to see him stepping out of a luxury vehicle. It fits the image of the future CEO we are celebrating. You want me to be his chauffeur? I asked, incredulous. You want me to pay for the wine, buy the flowers, and now drive him around like a servant so he can look rich in my car? Do not be dramatic, she scoffed. It is just a ride. It adds to the prestige. And Eliana, about that $2,300. I need you to transfer it by tonight. The event coordinator is nagging me. I looked at the invoice on my screen. I looked at the text messages still popping up from my cousins calling me selfish. I thought about Julian's startup and his refusal to show his grades. They wanted my money to paint over the cracks. They wanted my car to polish a lie. They wanted me to fund the very stage play that was designed to exclude me. I will handle the payment. Mom, I said, my voice steady with a new, cold resolve. But I need to call the restaurant directly to authorize the card. I do not like sending large amounts over Venmo or bank transfer. I will take care of it. Fine, she said, sounding relieved. Just get it done, and clean your car. It was dusty the last time I saw it. She hung up. I did not call the restaurant. Not yet. I sat in the silence, the anger finally crystallizing into something useful, something sharp. $2,300. That wasn't just a party budget. That was a specific number. And Julian's pressure wasn't academic anxiety. It was the desperation of a man backed into a corner. I wasn't going to pay a cent, not until I knew exactly what I was buying. I opened my laptop and typed in a search query. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a woman who managed million-dollar ad campaigns. I knew how to research. I knew how to find the things people tried to hide. I was going to find out what Julian and my parents were really hiding. Even if I had to tear the Golden Swan down brick by brick to find the truth. The checkbook was closed. The investigation was open. I did not go home that evening. Instead, I stayed in my office until the cleaning crew arrived. The hum of the vacuum cleaner the only sound accompanying my frantic typing. I needed to know the truth, and I knew that relying on my mother's word was as useful as trying to build a house on quicksand. I reached out to Kenji, a private investigator I had used occasionally for vetting high-profile talent for our agency's campaigns. Kenji was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. I sent him Julian's full name, his date of birth, and the name of the university. I also asked him to look into any outstanding financial liabilities attached to my brother's name. I need this by tomorrow afternoon. Kenji. I told him over the encrypted messaging app we used. And I need you to dig deep. Academic records, civil suits, everything. Consider it done, came the reply. The next morning, the atmosphere at Nebula Horizons was still buzzing with the energy of my promotion, but I felt like an actor wearing a costume that didn't fit. I was trying to review a storyboard for a new automotive client when the receptionist, a sweet girl named Maya, buzzed my line. Her voice was tight, laced with a panic that made my stomach drop. Ms. Woodcroft? There is a man here to see you. He says he is your brother, but he is shouting. He is demanding to see you right now." I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea rolling over me. "I will be right out. Maya, do not let him pass the glass doors." I walked to the lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythm that tried to project a confidence I did not feel. Through the glass partition, I saw him, Julian. He did not look like the future entrepreneur my mother bragged about. He looked unwashed. His hair was greasy, sticking up in tufts, and he was wearing a hoodie that had seen better days. He was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly at the security guard. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a manic intensity that frightened me. "Eliana," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Tell this gorilla to back off. I need to talk to you." I badged open the door and stepped out, grabbing his arm and dragging him toward the elevators, away from the prying eyes of my colleagues and clients who were sitting in the waiting area. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, pulling him into a quiet corner near the fire exit. "You are embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" Julian let out a jagged laugh. He smelled of stale beer and sweat. "You are embarrassing the family. Mom said you are refusing to pay. You have to pay. Eliana, you have to give me the card." "I told Mom I would think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice low. "Why are you so desperate? The party is days away." "I need to book the extras," he stammered, his eyes darting around the lobby. "The flowers, the DJ. They need cash deposits today or they walk. Just give me your credit card. I will run it and bring it back." "I am not giving you my credit card. Julian," I said firmly. "If I pay the vendors directly." "No," he grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging into my blazer. "You do not understand. I need the money now. Give it to me. You rich, selfish Hey!" The security guard stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Is there a problem here, Ms. Woodcroft?" Julian flinched, shrinking back like a kicked dog. The aggression evaporated, replaced by a terrified trembling. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, swimming with moisture. "Please, Eliana," he whispered, and for a second, I saw the little brother I used to read bedtime stories to. "Just give me the $2,300. Please, I am begging you." "Go home, Julian," I said, my voice shaking. "Go shower. We will talk later." He stared at me for a long moment, a mix of hatred and terror on his face, before turning and bolting out the revolving doors. I stood there, smoothing my blazer, feeling the stares of the receptionist and the clients burning into my back. I had climbed to the top of my field. Yet my family had the unique ability to drag me down into the gutter in seconds. I went back to my desk, unable to focus. The desperation in Julian's eyes wasn't about a party. I knew that look. It was the look of a trapped animal. At 2 p.m, my computer pinged. It was the email from Kenji. The subject line was simply, "Report, J. Woodcroft." I opened the PDF, my breath hitching in my throat. The first page was the academic verification, or rather, the lack thereof. Status: withdrawn, involuntary. Date: February of last year. Reason: academic dishonesty, repeat offense, and failure to satisfy financial obligations. I read it twice. Julian hadn't just failed a class. He had been kicked out over a year ago for cheating. He hadn't been a student for 14 months. There was no degree. There was no graduation. The entire premise of the party at the Golden Swan was a fabrication. But the report didn't stop there. Kenji was thorough. He had included a section on known associates and liabilities. There, in black and white, was the explanation for the panic. Julian had been frequenting an illegal gambling den in the basement of a warehouse district pool hall. The report listed a series of debts, but one stood out: a debt to a local loan shark known for violent collections. Outstanding balance: $2,300. Due date: Friday, May 24th, the date of the party. I felt the blood drain from my face. The number wasn't arbitrary. My mother hadn't estimated the cost of wine and flowers. They needed exactly $2,300 to pay off a thug who was likely threatening to break Julian's legs, or worse, if he didn't pay up by the night of the graduation. But the most sickening realization was yet to come. I scrolled down to the appendix of the report, where Kenji had attached communication logs recovered from a shared family cloud account I had set up for my parents years ago and forgotten to log out of on my old laptop. There was an email chain between my mother and father from 3 weeks ago. From Patricia Woodcroft to Robert Woodcroft. Subject: the party plan. Robert: I know he didn't graduate. I know he is in trouble with those people again. But if we do not throw this party, the cousins will ask questions. Everyone is expecting a ceremony. We have to fake it. We will tell them the university mailed the diploma due to a clerical error. We invite everyone. We collect the cash gifts. Aunt Linda always gives at least $500, and your partners will give more, and we use that money to pay off the rest of his debts and maybe get the mortgage current. We just need to get through the night. From Robert Woodcroft to Patricia Woodcroft. Subject: R.E. The party plan. It is risky. Pat: what about the fee for the shark? Julian says he needs it before the party starts or they will come to the venue. From Patricia Woodcroft to Robert Woodcroft. Subject: R.E. The party plan. I will get Eliana to pay that part. She is desperate for our approval. I will tell her it is for wine. She will write the check. She always does. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the leather creaking softly. The office was silent around me, but inside my head, there was a roaring sound, like a dam breaking. They knew. My parents weren't just enabling a lazy son. They were active architects of a fraud. They were orchestrating a fake graduation party, inviting friends and family to celebrate a lie, purely to harvest cash gifts to cover their own financial mismanagement and their son's gambling addiction. And me? I wasn't the beloved daughter. I wasn't even the black sheep. I was the mark. I was the patsy. I was the ATM they could kick until it dispensed cash to save their golden boy from the consequences of his own actions. She is desperate for our approval. The words burned on the screen. My mother had weaponized my love, my desire for connection, my lifelong struggle to be seen, and turned it into a line item on a scammer's budget. She looked at me and saw nothing but a checkbook. I felt a physical urge to vomit. I ran to the private bathroom in my office suite and dry heaved over the sink. I washed my face with cold water, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was pale, her eyes wide with shock. But as the seconds ticked by, the shock began to harden. It cooled into ice. I walked back to my desk. I looked at the invoice for the Golden Swan. I looked at the picture of Julian terrified in the lobby. If I refused to pay, Julian might get beaten up. Part of me, the sister part, flinched at that. But the other part, the part that had eaten a convenience store muffin on her graduation day, realized that saving him now would only ensure he did it again, and again, and again. But simply refusing wasn't enough anymore. If I just said no, they would spin it. They would tell the family I was cruel. They would say I left my brother to die. They would play the victims, and I would be the villain in their twisted narrative forever. No, I couldn't just walk away. I had to end it. I had to expose the rot so thoroughly that they could never rebuild the facade. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady now, perfectly steady. I typed a message to my mother. Hi, Mom. I have thought about it. You are right. Family comes first. I am sorry for being difficult. I want to pay the $2,300 for the wine and flowers. I want everything to be perfect for Julian. I watched the 3 dots of her typing bubble appear almost instantly. She was probably sitting by the phone, waiting for her prey to stumble into the trap. Oh, Eliana, thank God you came to your senses. I knew you were a good sister deep down. Transfer the money to my account now so I can pay the vendor. I smiled. But it was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a predator's smile. Actually, Mom, my bank has a strict limit on transfers today because of the down payment activity for my apartment. I cannot move the cash electronically until next week. But I have a solution. I will bring a certified cashier's check for $2,300 directly to the Golden Swan on the night of the party. I will hand it to the manager myself before the toasts begin. That way, the vendor gets paid instantly, and we do not have to wait for bank clearances. I waited. This was the gamble. If the loan shark needed the money before the party, this wouldn't work. But if Julian had bought himself time until the night of Mom, are you sure you can't withdraw cash? The coordinator really wanted it in advance, me. I literally cannot. My account is frozen for large withdrawals until the mortgage clears, except for certified checks payable to vendors. It is the only way. Mom, but I promise, I will be there early with the check. You can tell the coordinator it is guaranteed. A long pause. She was likely conferring with Julian. Julian would be terrified, but he would also be desperate. He would probably tell the loan shark that his rich sister was bringing the money to the party. He would buy himself a few more hours of safety. Mom, fine, but do not be late, and do not make a scene. Bring the check. We are counting on you. Me. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I set the phone down. They thought they had won. They thought the good sister was back in line, ready to pay the ransom for their fake happiness. They had no idea that I wasn't bringing a check to save them. I was bringing a wrecking ball. I opened my calendar and marked the date of the party. I had 2 days to prepare. I needed to contact the restaurant manager, not to pay, but to arrange a little technical surprise. I needed to upload the PDF from Kenji to a secure drive, and I needed to buy a dress. If I was going to burn my family's house of lies to the ground, I was going to look spectacular while doing it. The ghost of Eliana Woodcroft was gone. The executioner had taken her place. The Golden Swan was exactly the kind of place people like my parents chose when they wanted to convince the world they were something they were not. It was an assault of gilt and velvet, a cavernous hall where the chandeliers hung low and heavy like frozen tears, and the carpet was so thick it felt like walking on quicksand. The air smelled of expensive lilies and the desperate, metallic tang of social anxiety masquerading as joy. I arrived 15 minutes late, a calculated move designed to ensure the tableau was fully set before I stepped into the frame. I had chosen my outfit with the precision of a soldier selecting armor. It was a sharp, structural black dress that stood in stark contrast to the pastel frivolity of the party theme. I wore heels that clicked with a lethal authority against the marble foyer. As I entered the private banquet room, I paused to survey the scene. It was a masterclass in deception. There were at least 50 guests. My father's old business partners were clustered near the bar, nursing tumblers of scotch that I knew cost $40 a pour. My cousins, aunts, and uncles were seated at round tables draped in satin, devouring shrimp cocktails and chattering with the animated fervor that only free food and gossip could inspire. And there, in the center of it all, was the court jester crowned king, Julian. My brother was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with black lapels, a garment that screamed rental but was tailored just well enough to fool the untrained eye. He held a flute of champagne in one hand and was gesturing wildly with the other. Holding court with a group of our younger cousins and a few of my father's more gullible friends, I drifted closer, staying in the shadows of a large floral arrangement. Listening to the performance. It is all about blockchain integration, Julian was saying, his voice loud and confident, buoyed by the alcohol. My startup is focusing on decentralized finance for the common man. We have already got some angel investors sniffing around in Silicon Valley. Once the degree is framed, I am flying out to Palo Alto to close the Series A funding. Incredible, Uncle Marcus said, nodding sagely. I always knew you had the head for business, son, just like your father. I felt a bitter bile rise in my throat. Julian didn't know the difference between blockchain and a bicycle chain. The only thing he had integrated recently was a debt to a violent loan shark. But look at them. They were eating it up. They wanted to believe. They wanted the Woodcroft name to be synonymous with success so badly that they were willing to ignore the fact that the CEO had sauce stains on his cuff and eyes that darted nervously toward the door every time it opened. My parents were flanking him like bodyguards of the lie. My mother, Patricia, was resplendent in a silver gown that I knew she had put on a credit card she couldn't pay off. She was beaming. Her smile stretched so tight it looked painful. She was touching arms, laughing too loudly, and pointing at Julian every few seconds as if to say, "Look, we did this. We are perfect." My father, Robert, looked the part of the proud patriarch, puffing on a cigar that was technically not allowed indoors. But no one dared correct him. He looked relieved, likely thinking that since I hadn't called to cancel, the check was coming. I stepped into the light. Aunt Linda was the first to see me. She nudged my mother, and the two of them turned. The smile didn't leave my mother's face, but her eyes hardened into flint. She didn't wave. She didn't come over to hug me. She simply tapped her wrist where a watch would be, mouthing the word, "late." I walked through the crowd. The whispers started almost immediately. I could hear the hiss of sibilance as I passed my relatives. "That is Eliana," I heard Cousin Sarah whisper to her husband. "Patricia said she tried to boycott the party because she was jealous of the attention Julian was getting." "Cheap," another voice muttered. "Making 6 figures in the city, and won't even buy her brother a drink." I kept my chin high, my expression pleasant and unbothered. Let them talk. In 10 minutes, they would have something much more substantial to discuss than my punctuality. I reached the head table. My father looked up, his eyes scanning my hands, looking for a checkbook or an envelope. When he saw I was empty-handed, his brow furrowed. "You made it," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "We were worried you were going to make a scene by not showing up." "I wouldn't miss Julian's big night," I said, my voice smooth. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Julian." Julian looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw the terror again. He looked past me, scanning the room, likely looking for the loan shark's enforcers. When he saw the room was clear, he let out a breath. "Did you bring it?" he hissed, leaning in so the guests couldn't hear. "The manager is asking for the settlement on the bar tab." "Relax, Julian," I said, patting his shoulder with a condescension that felt delicious. "Everything is under control. Enjoy your champagne." He relaxed, offering me a smug, triumphant grin. "Thanks, sis. I knew you would come through. You always do." I turned away before the disgust could show on my face. I needed to signal the asset. I caught the eye of the floor manager. David. David was not just a random employee. He was a former colleague of mine from an event planning agency I had interned with years ago. I had called him 2 days prior, explaining that I was planning a surprise reveal for my brother and that I needed his cooperation to make the timing perfect. He had no idea about the malice involved. He just thought it was a quirky family prank. David nodded imperceptibly. He adjusted his tie, picked up a leather folder containing the bill, and marched toward the head table with professional purpose. The room was buzzing with the low roar of conversation and the clinking of silverware. The appetizers were being cleared. It was the perfect lull. David stopped right between my father and mother. "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Woodcroft," David said, his voice polite but firm enough to carry to the nearby tables. "Not now," my father waved him away. "We are about to start the speeches." "I am afraid it has to be now, sir," David insisted, "per the contract terms for this specific package. The outstanding balance for the premium beverage service and the floral upgrades must be settled before the main course is served. We are at that threshold." The nearby conversations died down. People were looking. This was a breach of etiquette, a crack in the facade of limitless wealth. My mother's face flushed a deep, angry red. She forced a laugh, looking around at the guests. "Oh, these corporate policies, so rigid." She turned her gaze to me, her eyes drilling holes into my skull. "Eliana, darling, I believe this is your department. Why don't you handle this gentleman so we can proceed?" She said it loudly. She wanted everyone to know. "See, my daughter is paying. We are a family that supports each other." Julian looked at me, an expectant smirk on his face. My father crossed his arms, waiting. "Of course, Mom," I said, I didn't reach for my purse. Instead, I stood up. I walked past David, offering him a reassuring wink. I walked past my parents. I walked past Julian. I climbed the 3 small steps onto the low stage that had been set up at the front of the room, right next to the DJ booth. I reached out and took the microphone from the stand. A high-pitched feedback whine cut through the room. Silencing the last few conversations, every eye was on me. 50 pairs of eyes, my family, their friends, the witnesses to my life of marginalization. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady, amplified, and clear, filling every corner of the hall. My mother looked confused. This wasn't the plan. I was supposed to hand David a check, not give a speech. She made a gesture for me to get down, but I ignored her. "For those of you who do not know me, I am Eliana, Julian's sister," I continued, smiling warmly. "My mother asked me to take care of a very specific contribution to this evening's festivities, the cost of the celebration itself, specifically, the $2,300 required to keep the wine flowing and the flowers standing tall." There was a polite ripple of laughter and applause. Aunt Linda nodded approvingly, seemingly thinking I was publicly announcing my generosity. "But before I settle that bill," I said, my tone shifting slightly, becoming more contemplative, "I wanted to say a few words about what we are celebrating tonight. We are celebrating a graduation, but what does that really mean?" I looked down at Julian. He was frozen, his glass halfway to his mouth. He sensed it. He sensed the shift in the air. "Graduation isn't just about a piece of paper," I said, pacing slowly across the stage. "It is about maturity. It is about the transition from a boy who relies on others to a man who stands on his own 2 feet. It is about honesty. It is about the hard work done in the dark when no one is watching." "Eliana, just pay the man," my father barked from the table, sensing the tension. "We can do speeches later." "I am almost done, Dad," I said into the mic, cutting him off. "You see, growing up, I learned that actions have consequences. I learned that you cannot buy respect. You have to earn it. And tonight, my family asked me to pay $2,300 to honor Julian's achievement." I paused. I looked directly at my mother. "And I would have gladly paid it," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a scream. "I would have paid 10 times that amount if there was actually an achievement to celebrate." The room went deadly silent. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. "Eliana, stop it!" My mother stood up, knocking her chair over. "She is drunk. Cut the mic." But the DJ was confused. Looking between me and my mother, I had tipped him $100 earlier to keep the channel open no matter what. "I tried to pay. Mom," I said, my voice hardening, shedding the warmth like a snake shedding skin. "I really did, but I have a personal policy. I only pay for real graduation parties. I do not pay for fairy tales." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. I pointed it at the massive projection screen behind me, which had been displaying a slideshow of Julian's childhood photos. "You all came here to celebrate Julian's degree," I announced. "So, let's look at it." I pressed the button. The screen flickered. The cute baby photos vanished. In their place, a high-resolution, 10-foot-tall image appeared. It was the PDF Kenji had sent me. The header of the university was unmistakable. The red stamp across the document was jagged and violent. "Notice of expulsion, student, Julian Woodcroft. Date, February 14th, 2025. Reason, academic dishonesty. Plagiarism, failure to satisfy financial obligations." The text was huge, legible from the back of the room. "As you can see," I narrated, my voice cold and clinical, "Julian did not graduate this week. Julian hasn't been a student for over 14 months. He was expelled for cheating and for not paying his tuition. Tuition money, I might add, that my parents gave him, and which mysteriously disappeared." Gasps erupted around the room. It was a physical wave of sound. I saw Aunt Linda cover her mouth. I saw my father's business partners squinting at the screen, putting on their reading glasses to confirm what they were seeing. Julian let out a strangled sound, a mix of a sob and a scream. He looked at the screen, then at the guests, his face draining of all color until he looked like a corpse in a tuxedo. "Eliana!" my father roared. His face purple, he started moving toward the stage. "And that bill?" I continued, speaking faster now, riding the adrenaline. "The $2,300 my mother insisted I pay? It wasn't for wine. It wasn't for flowers." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time, it was a screenshot of the debt ledger Kenji had uncovered, alongside the threatening text messages sent to Julian's burner phone, which Kenji had intercepted from the cloud backup. Text message: "Pay the $2,300 by Friday night, or we break your knees at the party. We know where you will be. Julian needs $2,300 tonight because he owes it to a loan shark for gambling debts," I said, looking straight at the guests. "This party, the Golden Swan, the champagne, it is all a front. It is a fundraising event disguised as a celebration. My parents invited you here, hoping your cash gifts would save their son from the criminals he owes money to." My mother let out a shriek that sounded inhuman. She lunged at my father, trying to push him toward me, screaming, "Stop her! Kill her!" But the damage was done. The screen loomed over them, a glowing indictment of their fraud. The perfection was shattered. The ghosts I had mentioned in my mind were no longer haunting me. They were haunting the room, stripping the flesh off the lies until only the ugly, naked bone remained. I lowered the microphone, but I didn't turn it off. The heavy breathing of the shocked room filled the speakers. I looked at the manager, David, who was staring at the screen with his mouth open. "I am sorry, David," I said, my voice projecting without the mic now. "But as you can see, I will not be covering the bill. I think the host should handle it." I stood there on the stage, a lone figure in black against the glowing evidence of their ruin, watching the chaos begin to unfurl like a dark flower blooming in fast motion. The silence broke, replaced by the roar of betrayal. The party of liars was officially over. The reckoning had begun. The silence that followed my revelation was not the peaceful quiet of a library. It was the suffocating, heavy silence of a bomb shelter right after the explosion. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound in the banquet hall was the hum of the projector fan and the jagged, terrified breathing of my brother. Julian stood frozen, his face drained of so much blood that he looked like a wax figure melting under the stage lights. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen where his shame was projected in high definition. The text message threatening to break his knees seemed to pulse in the air, a neon sign announcing the end of his golden boy era. Then, the silence broke. It started with a gasp from Aunt Linda, followed by the clatter of silverware dropping onto china plates. Then came the murmurs, rising rapidly into a cacophony of confusion and outrage. "Expelled?" someone whispered loudly. "But Patricia told me he made the dean's list." "Gambling?" another voice hissed. "I just gave him an envelope with $500 in it." My mother, Patricia, snapped out of her shock. The humiliation ignited a primal rage in her. She didn't look like my mother anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. With a shriek that tore through the sophisticated atmosphere of the Golden Swan, she hiked up her silver gown and scrambled onto the stage. Her face was contorted, her makeup smeared, her eyes wild. "You vicious little liar!" she screamed, lunging for the microphone in my hand. "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" I had anticipated this. I had spent 27 years learning to dodge her emotional blows. Dodging a physical one was surprisingly easy. I took a calm, calculated step to the left. My mother, carried by the momentum of her own fury and restricted by her tight dress, stumbled past me, nearly tripping over the monitor cables. She caught herself on the podium, panting, her chest heaving. "It is not a lie, Mother," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the rising din of the crowd. I didn't need to shout. The truth was loud enough. The university registrar does not lie, the bank records do not lie, and the loan sharks who are currently waiting outside in the parking lot certainly do not lie. I turned my attention to Julian, who was shaking so hard the champagne flute in his hand was creating a miniature earthquake. I walked toward him, the microphone held loosely in my hand like a gavel. "Tell them, Julian," I commanded, my voice icy. "Tell Uncle Marcus and Aunt Linda what you really needed that $2,300 for. Tell them why you were so desperate for me to pay for the wine. It wasn't for a toast, was it? It was to keep your kneecaps intact." Julian opened his mouth, but only a dry squeak came out. He looked at the guests, then at me, and finally, his gaze darted to the exit, measuring the distance. "He is sick," my mother yelled. Finding her voice again, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "He has a condition. How dare you shame him? You are jealous. You have always been jealous of him." "Jealous?" I laughed. A sharp, barking sound that had no humor in it. I yanked my arm away from her grip with a force that made her stumble back. "Jealous of what? A fraud? A thief? I am not the one who stole from Grandma's pension fund to play poker. Mom, did you think I didn't see that in the financial records too?" That accusation was the spark that ignited the powder keg. The room erupted. "Pension fund?" a cousin shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. "That money was supposed to be safe." "I want my gift back." Aunt Linda stood up, her face red. She marched toward the gift table where a pile of envelopes sat in a decorative birdcage. "I am not funding a gambling addict." "Me neither." Uncle Marcus joined her, looking furious. "Robert, what is the meaning of this? You told me he was launching a tech firm." The banquet hall descended into chaos. The carefully curated image of the Woodcroft family was dissolving in real time. Guests were arguing, grabbing their envelopes, and pointing fingers. My father, Robert, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally exploded. His face turned a deep, bruised purple. He roared, a sound of pure, impotent male rage, and charged toward the stage. "You ungrateful wretch!" he bellowed. He bounded up the steps, his hand raised high, aiming a backhand slap directly at my face. "I will teach you to ruin this family." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Before his hand could make contact, a massive figure in a dark suit stepped out from the shadows of the wings. It was the private security guard I had hired earlier that day, a former linebacker named Marcus, who made my father look like a twig. Marcus caught my father's wrist in midair, stopping the blow with effortless strength. "I wouldn't do that, sir," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He twisted my father's arm slightly, forcing him to step back and sit down hard on one of the stage monitors. My father gasped, clutching his wrist, looking up at the guard, and then at me with utter disbelief. He had never been told no in his life, certainly not by me. I looked down at him, then at my mother, who was sobbing hysterically on the floor, and finally at Julian, who was trying to hide behind a decorative column. "You wanted money," I said, addressing them all. "You harassed me for weeks. You guilt-tripped me. You called me selfish. You demanded exactly $2,300 to buy the illusion of a happy family." I reached into my black clutch. My hand closed around the thick stack of paper I had prepared. "Well, I believe in paying my debts," I said. "Since this entire evening is a piece of theater, I thought I would pay with the appropriate currency." I pulled out the stack. It wasn't legal tender. It was prop money I had ordered from a theatrical supply store, high-quality print, but clearly marked "for motion picture use only," where the president's face should be. "Here is your $2,300, I said. I threw the stack into the air. The bills fluttered down like confetti, drifting over my mother's weeping form, landing on my father's lap, and scattering across the stage floor. It was a rain of worthless paper for a worthless cause. "It is fake," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "Just like Julian's degree. Just like your reputation. Just like your love for me." My mother looked up, clutching one of the fake bills, her face a mask of tragedy. "Eliana, how could you? We are your family." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You are my biological relatives. Family doesn't treat their daughter like a bank account and their son like a deity. Family doesn't lie to everyone they know for 20 years. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a loud, final thud that echoed like a gavel strike dismissing a court case. "I refuse to sponsor this lie any longer," I said, my voice unamplified but steady. "Do not call me. Do not come to my office. Do not contact me. As far as you are concerned, Eliana Woodcroft died the moment she walked onto this stage." I turned on my heel. I didn't look back at the wreckage. I walked down the stairs, the click of my heels rhythmic and decisive. The guests parted from me like the Red Sea. No one said a word to me. They were too busy staring at the stage, or frantically texting, or trying to retrieve their cash gifts before my parents could get to them. I saw Aunt Linda clutching her envelope to her chest, looking at me with a mixture of fear and newfound respect. Cousin Sarah gave me a small, terrified nod. I walked toward the double doors at the back of the room. David, the manager, was standing there with 2 large bouncers and a police officer who had just arrived, likely called by the restaurant when the chaos started. "Ms. Woodcroft," David said, nodding to me. "I assume the bill remains unsettled?" "The hosts will be taking care of it," I said, gesturing vaguely behind me. "I believe they have plenty of assets to liquidate. If not, I am sure the police can help facilitate a payment plan." I pushed past them and stepped out into the cool night air. The transition was jarring. Inside was heat and noise. Outside was crisp and silent. Well, almost silent. As I walked toward the valet stand to retrieve my car, I saw a commotion near the service entrance of the restaurant. 3 men in leather jackets were standing there. They weren't guests. They looked hard, impatient, and dangerous. They were checking their watches. They were waiting for Julian. I paused for a brief second, watching them. A pang of old instinct, the sisterly urge to protect, flared up in my chest. But then I remembered the invoice. I remembered the muffin. I remembered the text message threatening my knees if I didn't pay. Julian had made his choices. He had chosen the gamble. He had chosen the lie. Now he had to pay the house. I handed my ticket to the valet. "The black sedan," I said. As I waited, I heard shouting from inside the restaurant. The doors flew open, and I saw my father trying to push past David, screaming about suing the restaurant. David simply crossed his arms, and the police officer stepped forward, blocking my father's path. They weren't going anywhere until that bill, the real bill for the food and the venue rental, was paid, and I knew for a fact their credit cards were maxed out. My car pulled up. I slid into the leather seat, the smell of new car interior filling my nose. It smelled like freedom. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the Golden Swan. In the rearview mirror, I saw the flashing lights of another police cruiser arriving at the scene. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I merged onto the highway, the city lights stretching out before me, endless and bright. I had paid the price of admission, not $2,300. But the price of my own innocence, and as I drove into the dark, I realized it was the best bargain I had ever made. I moved into my new apartment 3 days after the disaster at the Golden Swan. It was a sleek, modern unit on the 22nd floor of a building that required a key fob for the lobby, a code for the elevator, and a fingerprint scan for the door. The security was excessive for most people, but for me, it was a necessity. I was not just protecting my property, I was protecting my peace. I had blocked every number associated with the surname Woodcroft. My phone, once a source of constant anxiety, became blissfully silent. No more guilt-tripping texts, no more frantic voicemails demanding cash. For the first time in my life, my resources were my own. My paycheck from Nebula Horizons went directly into my savings and my mortgage. Not into the black hole of Julian's debts or my parents' delusions of grandeur. My career flourished, without the emotional anchor of my family dragging me down. I felt lighter, sharper. I led a pitch for a major electric vehicle manufacturer and won the account, a victory that secured my position as the youngest creative director in the firm's history. My boss, a stern woman named Eleanor, actually smiled at me during the celebration toast. "You seem different, Eliana," she noted. "Focused, dangerous." She meant it as a compliment. I took it as a statement of fact. But silence, I learned, is rarely empty. It is often just the pause before a different kind of noise. 2 weeks into my new life, the digital assault began. It started with a notification from a cousin I hadn't blocked yet. Someone harmless. I had thought, "Cousin Sarah. Eliana, have you seen Facebook? You need to look." I logged into the account I barely used. My feed was flooded. My mother, Patricia, had not gone quietly into the night. She had gone to the court of public opinion. There, on her timeline, was a post that had already garnered hundreds of likes and comments from extended family, church members, and neighbors. It was a masterpiece of fiction. My heart is broken into a million pieces. Our family celebration was destroyed by the jealousy and cruelty of my own daughter. After we sacrificed everything to raise her, she humiliated her brother on his special day, spreading vicious lies because she couldn't stand to see him shine. She abandoned her aging parents with a massive bill she promised to pay, laughing as she left us in financial ruin. Please pray for Julian, who is so traumatized he can barely eat. We never thought the child we nurtured would turn into a monster. It was accompanied by a photo of her crying, holding a tissue. I scrolled through the comments. They were vitriolic. "Aunt Linda. Shameful. I always knew she was cold." Random neighbor. "How can a child do that to her parents?" Disgusting. Church friend. "Praying for you." Patricia. "God sees the wicked." They were painting me as the villain in a soap opera I hadn't even auditioned for. My stomach churned, but I resisted the urge to reply. Engaging would only feed the fire. I took screenshots of everything, the lies, the defamation, and saved them to a folder named Evidence, but the attacks didn't stay online. A week later, I was walking to my car in the secure parking garage at work. I always parked in the same spot, under a bright LED light near the camera. As I approached my sedan, I stopped. The car was sitting lopsided. I walked closer. Both tires on the driver's side were slashed, the rubber gaping open like jagged mouths. Scratched into the driver's door keying, crude and jagged, was a single word: pay. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just online harassment anymore. This was physical intimidation. I looked around the garage. It was empty, the concrete pillars casting long shadows. I felt watched. I quickly got back into the elevator and went straight to the building's security office. We reviewed the footage. At 10:45 a.m., a figure in a hooded sweatshirt had slipped through the gate behind a delivery truck. He kept his head down, avoiding the cameras, but there was a moment, just a split second, where he turned his head. It was grainy, but I knew the jawline. I knew the way he walked, a slouching, defeated shuffle. Julian. He wasn't in jail. He wasn't in the hospital. He was here, stalking me. The loan sharks must have given him an ultimatum: get the money from your sister, or else, and now he was desperate enough to hunt me. I filed a police report, but without a clear face shot. They said there wasn't much they could do except increase patrols. Get a restraining order, the officer advised. It creates a paper trail. I started the paperwork that night, but the next morning, the real blow landed. I received an alert from my credit monitoring service. New inquiry. Quick cash payday loans. I frowned. I hadn't applied for a loan. I had a mortgage and a pristine credit score. I logged into the app. My heart stopped. There wasn't just one inquiry. There were 5, all in the last 48 hours, and 3 of them had been approved. Loan 1, $5,000. Loan 2, $3,500. Loan 3, $7,000, over $15,000 in high interest. Predatory loans had been taken out in my name. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. How? I had my ID, I had my cards. Then I remembered. Before I moved out, before the party, I had left a box of old documents at my parents' house, tax returns from my college years, old bank statements. My social security card was in a fireproof box in my old closet. They hadn't just used my name, they had stolen my identity. I called the loan company immediately. "This is fraud," I told the representative, my voice shaking with rage. "I did not authorize this." "Ma'am, the application was signed electronically using your social security number and your mother's maiden name as the security answer," the agent droned. "The funds were dispersed to a joint checking account ending in 4598. That was the family emergency account, an account my name was technically still on from when I was 16, but which I hadn't used in a decade. My parents had used my credentials to take out loans to pay off Julian's debt and the restaurant bill. They were dragging me down into the abyss with them. If I didn't stop this, my credit would be destroyed, my mortgage could be recalled, my security clearance for work could be revoked. I hung up the phone. The shaking stopped. The fear evaporated, replaced by a clarity that was terrifying in its intensity. Leaving wasn't enough. Blocking them wasn't enough. Moving to a high-security building wasn't enough. As long as they were free, as long as they felt entitled to my existence, they would never stop feeding on me. I looked at the folder of screenshots. I looked at the police report for the slashed tires. I looked at the fraud alerts. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "You want a war? Let's have a war." I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to counterattack. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had been saving for a worst-case scenario. It was a lawyer named Evelyn, a specialist in familial fraud and identity theft. She was known as the Shark in legal circles. "Evelyn," I said when she answered, "I have a case for you. It involves identity theft, harassment, and vandalism. The perpetrators are my parents and my brother." "I see." Evelyn's voice was smooth, professional, and devoid of pity. "Do you want to settle, or do you want to prosecute?" "I want them to pay," I said, staring at the city skyline, my reflection in the glass looking back at me with eyes of steel. "I want everything back, and I want to make sure they can never use my name again." "Then we need proof," Evelyn said. "We need them to admit it. We need a confession that ties the fraud directly to them, not just a clerical error or a misunderstanding." "A confession," I repeated. I knew exactly how to get it. My parents were greedy, they were desperate, and they thought they could manipulate me. I would give them one last chance to do exactly that. I would dangle the bait, and when they bit, I would pull the hook so hard it would tear their world apart. "I will get you the confession," I told Evelyn. "Prepare the paperwork." I hung up. I sat down at my desk and opened my blocked list. I found my mother's number. My finger hovered over the unblock button. This was it, the point of no return. I was about to invite the vampires back into my life for one final dinner, but this time, I wasn't the meal, I was the steak. Evelyn, my attorney, was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of marble and dressed in Italian silk. Her office was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the financial district, a stark contrast to the chaotic, crumbling world I had left behind. On the polished oak table between us lay a series of documents that told the story of my financial assassination. "We have the what, Eliana," Evelyn said, tapping a manicured fingernail on a grainy black and white photograph. "But we need the why and the how in their own words." The photograph was a still frame from a security camera at a bank branch in the suburbs. It showed a woman wearing a scarf and large sunglasses standing at a teller window. Even with the disguise, I knew the posture. I knew the way she held her purse. It was my mother, Patricia. She was presenting a withdrawal slip for the fraudulent loan account she had opened in my name. "Is this not enough?" I asked, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. "That is her. That is my social security number on the application. It is circumstantial, Evelyn corrected me, her voice cool and pragmatic. She could argue you authorized her to pick up the cash. She could argue she was acting as your agent during a family crisis, in familial fraud cases. Juries are notoriously soft. They see a mother helping a daughter, or a misunderstanding. To get a conviction that sticks, and to ensure the debt is fully discharged from your name without years of credit repair hell, we need malice. We need intent. You want a confession, I stated. I want a recording, Evelyn replied. She slid a small, matte black device across the table. It was smaller than a pack of gum. This is a high-fidelity digital recorder. It has a battery life of 12 hours. If you can get them to admit that they forged your signature without your permission, and specifically that they did it to pay off debts you didn't agree to, we own them. I picked up the device. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in significance. They won't just say it. They are liars by nature. Liars get sloppy when they are desperate, Evelyn said. And right now, they are drowning. They maxed out the fraudulent loans, but the interest is eating them alive, and I suspect your brother's creditors are not satisfied. They need more. They need you. She was right. The silence from my end had likely driven them into a frenzy. Unblock them, Evelyn instructed. Let the call come through. Act defeated. Act like the guilt is finally eating you alive. Give them an opening, and they will walk right into the trap. I left her office with the recorder tucked into my purse and a pit in my stomach the size of a boulder. I sat in my car for a long time before I finally opened my phone settings. My thumb hovered over the red circle next to Mom. I pressed it. I unblocked my father next, then Julian. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. It was my mother. I took a deep breath. Channeling every ounce of performance art I had learned from watching them my entire life, I answered. Hello? My voice was quiet, shaky. Eliana, my mother's voice cracked through the speaker, a symphony of performative grief. Oh, thank God. We have been so worried. Why did you disappear? We thought something happened to you. I just needed time. Mom, I said, letting a wobble enter my tone. I was angry, but I have been thinking a lot. We have been thinking too. Honey, she rushed on, the tears flowing freely now. We are so sorry about the party. We were just under so much pressure. You have no idea. We are losing everything. Eliana. The bank sent a foreclosure notice yesterday. We are going to be on the street. I knew for a fact the foreclosure process took months, not weeks, but I didn't correct her. The house? I asked. But that is my childhood home. I know, she wailed. And Julian, he is in such a bad place. He hasn't eaten in days. We are a family. Eliana, we make mistakes, but we fix them together. Please, can you come home? Just for dinner? Your father wants to apologize. We just want to see you. We want to make things right. It was the hook, the lure. Come home. We love you. We are victims. I don't know. Mom, I hesitated. I am still hurt. Please, she begged, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Just dinner. Tonight, 6 o'clock. I will make that pot roast you used to love. Please, Eliana, do not let us lose the house without saying goodbye. Okay, I whispered. I will come. I hung up and immediately dialed Evelyn. It is set. Tonight at 6. Good, Evelyn said. Remember the protocol. Wear the wire. Turn on your location sharing with me and your emergency contact. If you are not out by 8, or if the audio cuts, I am sending the police for a welfare check. Understood. I went home and prepared for the evening as if I were going into battle. I chose a loose-fitting blouse that would easily conceal the recorder, which I taped to the underside of my bra strap. I made sure my phone was fully charged, and the GPS was broadcasting my real-time location to Evelyn and my best friend, Jessica. I drove to the suburbs as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple, casting long, sinister shadows over the neighborhood I had grown up in. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked like a dying thing. The lawn, usually my father's pride and joy, was overgrown with weeds. The shutters were drawn tight, making the house look blind. There was a strange car in the driveway, a beat-up sedan I didn't recognize. Probably a rental, or perhaps Julian's latest acquisition before the repo men came. I took a breath, tapped the recorder through my shirt to ensure it was on, and walked to the front door. My mother opened it before I could knock. She looked terrible, but in a curated way. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed, but she was wearing a nice dress. "Eliana!" She threw her arms around me. Her perfume was overpowering, masking the stale smell of the house. "My baby is home." I stood stiffly in her embrace, my heart hammering against the plastic device taped to my chest. "Hi, Mom." She pulled me inside. The interior was shocking. The hallway was empty. The antique grandfather clock that used to stand by the stairs was gone. I glanced into the living room. The leather sofas were missing, replaced by folding chairs. The grand piano was gone. "We had to sell a few things," she said, catching my stare, "to keep the lights on. It has been very hard." My father came out of the kitchen. He looked older, his face gray and unshaven. He didn't hug me. He just nodded, a look of wary calculation in his eyes. "You came," he said. "I came," I replied. "Where is Julian?" I asked. "In the kitchen," my father said. "He is ashamed to face you." We walked into the kitchen. Julian was sitting at the table, staring at a plate of appetizers. He looked up when I entered. He didn't look ashamed. He looked hungry, not for food, but for salvation. "Hey," he mumbled. "Hi, Julian," I said, taking a seat at the far end of the table, keeping my back to the wall. The table was set with the good china, but the food was meager, a store-bought roasted chicken and some instant mashed potatoes. There was, however, a very expensive-looking bottle of red wine already open. "Let's drink a toast," my father said, reaching for the bottle immediately. "To family, to forgiveness." He poured a large glass and slid it toward me. The liquid swirled, dark and opaque. "I am driving, Dad," I said, pushing the glass slightly away. "Just water for me." "Oh, come on," he insisted, his smile tight. "One glass won't hurt. It is a vintage I saved just for this. Besides, you can stay the night. Your room is ready." "I have work early tomorrow," I lied. "I really cannot." My mother's eyes darted to my father. A silent communication passed between them. The tension in the room spiked. They wanted me to drink that wine, desperately. "Eliana," my mother said, her voice trembling, "do not be difficult. Your father is trying to be nice. Just a sip." "No," I said firmly. "So, you said you wanted to talk about the house? About the foreclosure?" I needed to steer the conversation. I needed the confession. My father sighed, setting the bottle down with a little too much force. "Yes, the house. We are 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank gives us until the end of the month to pay the arrears, or they auction it off." "How much?" I asked. $20,000, he said. "That is a lot of money," I said, leaning in. "Especially considering the loans you already took out. I saw the credit report. Dad, $15,000 in payday loans, in my name." The room went dead silent. Julian stopped chewing. "We had to," my mother stammered. "It was an emergency." "What kind of emergency required you to forge my signature?" I asked, keeping my voice level, fighting the urge to scream. "You used my social security number. You pretended to be me at the bank. Mom, I have the photos." "We were going to pay it back," Julian burst out, slamming his hand on the table. "God, you are so uptight. It was a temporary loan. I had a lock on a sports bet that was going to triple the money. We would have put it back in the account before you even noticed." "Gotcha. So you took the money for gambling?" I asked, looking at Julian. "Not for the mortgage?" "It was an investment," Julian yelled. And it would have worked if the referee hadn't made a bad call in the fourth quarter. And you? I looked at my parents. You knew? You helped him? We couldn't let him be hurt, my mother sobbed. Those men, the loan sharks, they said they would cut off his fingers. Eliana, what choice did a mother have? I had to sign the papers. I had to use your name because our credit is ruined. We did it to save his life. So you admit you signed my name on the loan applications without my permission? I pressed. You admit you impersonated me? We did what we had to do, my father shouted. And you should have given us the money when we asked. If you had just paid for the party and given us the cash, we wouldn't have had to go behind your back. This is your fault. Eliana, you forced our hand. The recorder against my ribs felt hot. That was it. That was the confession. Coercion, forgery, identity theft, all admitted to save Julian from his illegal activities. Okay, I said quietly. I understand. Good, my father said, his demeanor shifting instantly from angry to businesslike. He reached under the table and pulled out a manila folder. Since you understand, we can fix this. Tonight. He slid the folder toward me. What is this? I asked. It is a transfer of deed, he said, and a co-signing agreement for a refinancing plan. The bank agreed that if you put your name on the house and use your salary as collateral, they will stop the foreclosure and give us a lump sum cash out. A cash out? I raised an eyebrow. $50,000, Julian said, his eyes gleaming. Enough to pay off the payday loans, clear my debt, and give us a fresh start. You want me to sign over my financial future to you after you stole my identity? We are family, my mother cried. If you do not sign this, we go to jail. Eliana, the loan company is investigating the fraud. If they find out it wasn't you, they will prosecute us. You have to retroactive authorize the loans and sign this mortgage. You have to save us. Or what? I asked. My father stood up. He walked to the door of the kitchen and locked it. The click echoed loudly in the empty house. Or you do not leave this table until you do, he said, his voice low and threatening. I looked at the locked door. I looked at the glass of wine they had tried to force on me, likely laced with sleeping pills or sedatives to make me compliant or groggy enough to sign. I looked at Julian, who was gripping a steak knife a little too tightly. My heart was racing, but my mind was cold. You are going to keep me hostage? I asked. We are going to have a long family talk, my father said, crossing his arms. Until you see reason, you are not walking out of here and leaving us to rot. I glanced at my watch. 7:15. Evelyn would be watching the GPS dot. She would hear the conversation if the transmission was strong enough, but even if she didn't, the deadline was approaching. I need to use the restroom, I said. Sit down. Julian snapped. If I'm going to sign my life away, I said, standing up slowly. I need a moment to compose myself, unless you plan to assault me right here. My father hesitated. He looked at the paperwork, then at me. He thought he had won. He thought I was cornered. 5 minutes, he grunted. Julian, stand by the bathroom door. I walked into the hallway, Julian trailing close behind me like a jailer. I entered the small powder room and locked the door. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I pulled out my phone. Message to Evelyn. They confessed. They are locking me in. They are trying to force me to sign a mortgage. Dad is aggressive. Julian has a knife. Evelyn. Police are already en route. E.T. A 3 minutes. Stay in the bathroom. Do not open the door. I slumped against the sink, staring at my reflection. I looked terrified, but I also looked triumphant. I had them. I had the recording. I had the text messages. And now, I had them holding me against my will while the police were closing in. Eliana! Julian pounded on the door. Hurry up! Dad is getting impatient. I am coming! I yelled back. I wasn't coming out to sign. I was waiting for the cavalry. I heard a siren in the distance, just a faint wail at first, then growing louder. cutting through the suburban silence. "What is that?" I heard my mother ask from the kitchen. The pounding on the bathroom door stopped. "Eliana?" Julian's voice wavered. "Did you call someone?" I didn't answer. I just held the recorder tight, ensuring every second of their panic was captured for posterity. The trap had snapped shut, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one caught in the teeth. The air in the dining room was so thick with tension, it felt like breathing through a wet wool blanket. I sat at the head of the table, my back straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap, concealing the small red light of the recorder that was capturing every vibration of their betrayal. The good china sat unused. The roasted chicken had gone cold, the grease congealing on the platter, a perfect metaphor for the stagnant, unhealthy dynamic of this family. My father, Robert, cleared his throat, a sound that used to command respect, but now just sounded like a rusty gear grinding in a broken machine. He pushed the manila folder closer to me. "We need to discuss the solution, Eliana," he said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, paternal tone he used when he was trying to sell a lie. "We have admitted that we utilized your financial profile to secure some temporary funding. You were not using your credit capacity, and Julian was in a life-or-death situation. We did what any loving parents would do." "Utilized," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Is that what you call forging my signature and using my social security number without my consent? Utilizing?" "It was a bridge loan." My mother, Patricia, chimed in, her eyes wide and wet with performed sincerity. "We intended to pay it back before the first statement even arrived. But then, well, you know how luck goes." "Luck?" I said flatly. "You mean Julian's gambling addiction?" "It is not an addiction. It is a bad run," Julian snapped from across the table. He looked haggard, his skin sallow, but his eyes were darting around the room with a frantic, predatory energy. "And if you hadn't humiliated me at the party, I might have found an investor to cover the spread. You ruined my prospects, Eliana." "Let's not dwell on the past," my father interrupted, raising a hand. "We are here to fix the future. The bank is willing to refinance the house and consolidate Julian's debts, including the ones in your name, but because our credit score is currently challenged, we need a guarantor, and we need a down payment to stop the immediate foreclosure proceedings." He tapped the paper in front of me. "We need you to sign this," he said. "It is a co-signing agreement, and we need you to liquidate that apartment you just bought." I stared at him, genuinely impressed by the sheer magnitude of his audacity. "You want me to sell my home? The one I worked 5 years to buy?" "It is just an apartment, Eliana," my mother said softly, reaching out to touch my hand. I pulled back as if she were radioactive. "It is bricks and mortar. Julian is flesh and blood. Besides, you are single. You can move back in with us. We can be a family again. You don't need all that space in the city. It is dangerous there anyway." "And if I refuse?" I asked, my voice steady. My father leaned back, his chair creaking. A cold, hard look replaced the paternal mask. "If you refuse, Eliana, we will have no choice but to pursue legal action against you." I almost laughed. "Legal action? Against me? For what?" "Defamation of character," he said, his face dead serious. "The stunt you pulled at the Golden Swan. You projected private documents. You humiliated us in front of our community. You caused us severe emotional distress and loss of standing. A lawyer friend of mine says we have a strong case. The damages could be significant." "So let me get this straight," I said, leaning toward the hidden microphone. "You are threatening to sue me for exposing the truth about Julian's expulsion and debts unless I sell my apartment to pay off the fraudulent loans you took out in my name?" "We are offering you a settlement," my father corrected, his eyes narrowing. "Sign the paper, pay off the debts, and we forget the lawsuit. We forget that you tried to destroy this family. And you?" I looked at Julian. "What do you have to say?" Julian stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing next to me, then, in a theatrical display that would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic, he dropped to his knees. He grabbed the hem of my blouse. "Please, Eliana." He wept, but the tears looked forced. "I am sorry. I messed up. I promise. This is the last time. I just need a clean slate. I cannot go to jail. Those guys will kill me." "You said you were expelled for cheating," I said, looking down at him. "Is that true?" "Everyone cheats," he argued, his voice rising in a whine. "I just got caught. It is not fair. You always had it easy. Eliana, you are smart. I need help. Just sign the paper, sell the condo. You can make more money. You are rich now." As he spoke, I saw his eyes drift away from my face. He was looking at my purse, which was sitting on the floor next to my chair. It was a structured leather tote, an expensive gift I had bought myself after the promotion. He wasn't looking at it with appreciation. He was appraising it. He was calculating how much he could get for it at a pawn shop. "And the $2,300, I probed, ensuring the narrative was complete. "The money Mom demanded for the wine, that was for the loan shark, right? To stop him from breaking your legs?" "Yes," my mother cried out from the other end of the table. "We told you. We had no choice. Why do you keep making us say it? Yes, we forged the signature. Yes, the party was a distraction. Yes, we need the money. Now sign the paper." There it was, the full confession, intent, execution, and motive, all captured in high-fidelity audio. My mother pushed another document toward me. "This is the guarantee," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "It says you accept full responsibility for the existing loans and agree to cover Julian's outstanding balance. Just sign it, Eliana. Then we can eat. We can be happy." I looked at the paper. It was a death warrant for my financial future. It would tie me to their sinking ship forever. I picked up the pen. My parents held their breath. Julian stopped fake crying and watched the pen tip. I set the pen down. "No," I said. The silence that followed was violent. "What did you say?" my father whispered. I said no. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I am not selling my apartment. I am not signing this fraud. And I'm certainly not paying for Julian's mistakes ever again." "You ungrateful little bitch!" my father exploded. He lunged across the table, grabbing the bottle of wine and hurling it at the wall behind me. It shattered, spraying red liquid like arterial spray across the peeling wallpaper. He marched to the kitchen door, turned the deadbolt, and pocketed the key. "You are not leaving," he growled, turning to face me. He looked massive in the small room, a towering figure of rage. "You are going to sit down and sign that paper, or so help me God. You will not walk out of here tonight." "This is kidnapping, Dad," I said, my voice rising slightly, ensuring the recorder caught the fear I didn't have to fake completely. "You are holding me against my will. I am parenting you," he shouted. "Julian, get her purse. Get her phone. She is not calling anyone." Julian scrambled up from the floor. The pathetic act vanished instantly. He lunged for my bag. "Give it to me," he yelled. I grabbed the strap, pulling it back. "Don't touch my things. Julian." "I need it," he screamed, his face contorted with greed and desperation. "You have cash in there. I know you do. Give it to me." He yanked the bag hard. I stumbled back, hitting my hip against the table. The bag ripped open. My wallet, keys, and phone spilled onto the linoleum floor. My father moved toward me, his hands balled into fists. "Pick up the pen. Eliana, last chance." I looked at my phone on the floor. The screen was glowing. I had set a shortcut on the lock screen before I entered the house. A single tap would send a distress signal to the private security firm Evelyn worked with and dial 911. I dropped to my knees, not to beg, but to reach the phone. "She is going for the phone!" my mother shrieked. "Stop her!" Julian dove for me. Grabbing my ankle, I kicked out, my heel connecting with his shoulder. He yelped and let go. I grabbed the phone. I didn't need to unlock it. I just pressed the side button 5 times in rapid succession. A piercing, high-decibel alarm erupted from the device, filling the small kitchen with a deafening siren sound. My parents froze, covering their ears. "What is that?" my father yelled over the noise. "Turn it off!" I stood up, holding the phone like a shield. "That is the panic alarm," I shouted, my voice cold and hard. "The police have been tracking my GPS location since I walked in the door. They heard everything. They heard you admit to the forgery. They heard you admit to the fraud. And they certainly heard you threaten to keep me here." "You set us up?" My mother looked at me with horror, her face draining of color. "Your own parents?" "You set yourselves up when you stole my identity," I replied. "Evelyn, my lawyer, has the live feed. The officers are less than 2 minutes away." "You are lying," my father snarled, though he was backing away toward the window, looking out nervously. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I said. "Open the door, Dad, or add resisting arrest to the list of charges." "Julian, run!" my mother screamed. Realizing it was over, "Go out the back." Julian scrambled toward the back door, fumbling with the lock, but his hands were shaking too hard. Blue and red lights flashed against the kitchen window, cutting through the gloom of the room. The wail of real sirens joined the electronic scream of my phone. "It is too late," I said, watching my family crumble. "The bill has finally come due, and this time, you are the ones paying it." My father slumped against the counter, the key falling from his hand. My mother sank to the floor, weeping, real tears this time, tears of terror. Julian stood by the back door, trapped, looking at me with pure hatred. I stood amidst the spilled wine and the broken china, feeling a strange, hollow peace. I had walked into the lion's den, and I was the one walking out with the trophy. The charade of affection was over. The cold reality of justice was about to begin. The cacophony of sirens outside was not just a sound. It was a physical force that shattered the suffocating atmosphere of the kitchen. The red and blue lights strobed against the peeling wallpaper, turning my parents' faces into grotesque, flickering masks of terror, the arrogance that had filled the room only moments ago. The smug certainty that they could bully me into submission evaporated instantly. In its place was a frantic, animalistic panic. "Eliana, stop this!" My father, Robert, lunged toward me, but he stopped short of grabbing me, his eyes darting to the window where the silhouette of a police officer was already visible. "You have to tell them it is a mistake. Tell them it was a prank. Tell them we were just having a loud family argument." "Please, baby," my mother, Patricia, sobbed, clutching the edge of the table with white-knuckled desperation. "We are your parents. You cannot let them take us. Think about what this will do to our reputation. Think about the neighbors. Just go out there and tell them you accidentally triggered the alarm. We will tear up the contract. We will let you go. Just send them away." I looked at them, really looked at them. For the first time in years without the filter of familial guilt, I saw a man who had thrown a wine bottle at my head. I saw a woman who had forged my signature to fund a lie. I saw a brother who was currently trying to shimmy open the back window like a trapped rat. "It is too late for lies. Mom," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I told you the bill was due. Now you have to pay it." "Police, open the door!" A commanding voice boomed from the front porch, accompanied by a heavy, authoritative pounding that shook the frame of the house. "Do not answer it," Julian hissed from the back of the room. He had abandoned the window and was now looking frantically for a weapon, his eyes landing on the steak knife block. "He is going for a knife," I said loudly, directing my voice toward the door, ensuring the officers outside could hear me. "My brother is armed. They are holding me against my will." That was the trigger. There was a deafening crash as the front door was kicked in. The sound of wood splintering echoed through the empty hallway, Heavy boots thundered across the floorboards. "Police! Show me your hands! Get on the ground! Now!" The kitchen door burst open. 3 officers in tactical gear flooded the small room, their weapons drawn and leveled. The claustrophobic space suddenly felt microscopic. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" the lead officer screamed at my father. My father, the man who had terrified me for 2 decades, crumbled. He threw his hands up, his knees buckling as if his strings had been cut. "Do not shoot. I am a respectable man. She is my daughter. This is a misunderstanding." "Get on the ground!" the officer roared, kicking my father's legs apart and forcing him face down into the linoleum, right into the puddle of spilled red wine. It looked like blood pooling around him. My mother shrieked, a high-pitched wail of disbelief. "Do not touch him. He has a bad back. You cannot do this to us. We are the victims here. She set us up." An officer grabbed her wrists, spinning her around. The click of handcuffs ratcheting tight cut through her screams. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, his tone bored and practiced. "I will not be silent," she spat, twisting her head to look at me. Her face was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. The loving mother mask had slipped completely, revealing the monster underneath. "You did this. You ungrateful, poisonous snake. I gave you life. I fed you. And this is how you repay me? Sending the police to our house? You are dead to me. Eliana. Dead." I stood in the corner, my hands raised calmly to show I was non-hostile. I watched her scream insults at me, her spit flying, her eyes bulging. I felt nothing, no pain, no sadness, just the cool, clinical observation that she looked very ugly when she was finally being honest. "Secure that one," another officer shouted, pointing at Julian. Julian had tried to make a break for the back door again during the chaos, hoping the police were too focused on our parents, but he was slow, clumsy, and panicked. An officer tackled him before he even touched the handle. They went down hard, knocking over a chair. "Get off me!" Julian screamed, thrashing wildly. "I didn't do anything. It was all them. My parents made me do it." "Julian Woodcroft?" the officer asked, pinning him down and yanking his arms behind his back. "We have an outstanding warrant for your arrest, failure to appear in court for assault, and 3 counts of check fraud. Today is not your lucky day, son." So, the loan sharks weren't the only ones looking for him. He had been a fugitive even before the party. "It is a lie," Julian wept, his face pressed against the dirty floor. "Eliana, tell them. Help me. I am your little brother." I stepped forward slowly, lowering my hands as the officers secured the room. The lead officer, a tall woman with a stern face, approached me. "Are you the caller? Eliana Woodcroft?" she asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was clear. "I am the victim. They lured me here under false pretenses. They locked the door and refused to let me leave unless I signed a fraudulent mortgage agreement to cover debts they incurred by stealing my identity." I reached into my blouse and pulled out the small black recorder, the red light still blinking steadily. "I have a full confession recorded on this device," I said, handing it to her like a holy relic. "They admitted to forging my signature on 5 separate loan applications. They admitted to the coercion, and my brother admitted to misappropriating funds for illegal gambling." The officer took the device, bagging it immediately. "We will need your statement down at the station, Ms. Woodcroft, but this looks pretty open and shut. Assault, false imprisonment, identity theft, fraud. They are going away for a long time." "Good," I said. They began to haul them out. The procession was pathetic. My father, weeping about his dignity. My mother, still screaming curses at me, calling me every name in the book. Julian, sobbing and begging for a lawyer. I followed them out to the front yard. The entire neighborhood had turned out. The blue lights illuminated the faces of the people my parents had spent 20 years trying to impress. "Mrs. Gable from next door was in her bathrobe, her mouth hanging open. The Homeowners Association president was filming on his phone. They watched as Robert and Patricia Woodcroft, the pillars of the community, the parents of the genius entrepreneur, were shoved into the back of separate squad cars like common criminals. My mother saw the neighbors watching. For a second, she stopped screaming. She looked at Mrs. Gable, then at the handcuffs on her wrists. The realization of her social death seemed to hit her harder than the legal one. She slumped against the seat, burying her face in her hands. I stood on the porch, the cool night wind blowing through my hair. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and exhaust fumes, but to me, it smelled like victory. I didn't shed a tear. Why would I cry for a tumor that had finally been excised? Ms. Woodcroft? I turned. It was a detective who had arrived with the second wave of units. He was holding a pair of latex gloves and looking at a clipboard. "We are doing a preliminary sweep of the premises to secure any further evidence of the fraud you mentioned," he said. "We need to seize any financial documents, computers, or records that might be relevant to the identity theft." "Take whatever you need," I said. "The office is down the hall on the left. But they probably hid the real ledgers. My father is paranoid." "Actually," the detective said, a strange expression on his face, "we already found something. We found a floor safe in the master bedroom closet. It was open. Looks like someone was in a hurry to get something out or put something in recently." "There is nothing in there," I said with a bitter laugh. "They told me they were broke. They said they were losing the house for $20,000. The detective shook his head. "That is the thing, ma'am. It wasn't empty. We found a passbook savings account and a stack of cash." He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a blue bank book. "We did a quick count," he said. "There is nearly $55,000 in cash bundles, and the passbook shows a balance of $20,000. The account is in the name of Julian Woodcroft, but the deposits go back years." I stared at the bag. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. $75,000. They had $75,000 sitting in a safe in the bedroom. They had enough money to pay the $2,300 for the party. They had enough money to pay off the loan shark. They had enough money to save the house from foreclosure 3 times over. "Where did it come from?" I whispered, though I already suspected the answer. "We found some pay stubs associated with the cash bands," the detective said gently. "Some of it looks like pension withdrawals, but a lot of it, ma'am. Did you ever have a college fund? Or a savings account from your high school jobs?" "Yes," I said, my voice sounding far away. "But it disappeared. My parents told me the bank made an error, or that the market crashed. I lost about $10,000 when I was 18. "It is all here," the detective said, pointing to the ledger entries in the passbook. "Deposit dates match the withdrawals from your old custodial accounts. They didn't lose it. They took it, and they have been adding to it. Every time they told you they were broke, every time they asked you for rent money, every time they made you pay for groceries, they were hoarding it here." I felt a physical blow to my chest, harder than any punch my father could have thrown. They didn't steal from me because they were poor. They didn't destroy my credit because they were desperate. They did it because they wanted to. They had the money to save themselves. They had the money to save Julian, but they refused to touch Julian's hoard. In their twisted logic, that money was sacred. It was for his future. But my money, my credit, my life, that was expendable. They would rather burn my existence to the ground than spend a single dime of their golden boy's inheritance. They weren't just selfish, they were evil. I looked at the squad car where my mother was sitting. She was looking out the window at me. I walked down the driveway until I was standing right next to the glass. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes for a second. Hope that maybe I would relent, that I would tell the police to stop. I leaned in close to the glass. "They found the safe. Mom," I said. Her eyes went wide. The color drained from her face so completely she looked like a ghost. She knew. She knew that I knew. $75,000, I said, my voice vibrating with a rage so pure it felt like holiness. You had it the whole time. You let me eat ramen noodles. You let me work 2 jobs. You tried to ruin my career. All to protect a pile of cash you stole from me." She mouthed something. It looked like it was for him. "I hope it was worth it," I said, "because the police are seizing it as proceeds of fraud. Julian will never see a cent of it, and neither will you." I tapped the glass twice. Tap, tap, a final goodbye. "Take them away," I said to the officer. I turned my back on them. As the cruisers pulled away, carrying the wreckage of my past into the darkness, I didn't feel the need to look back. The Eliana who craved their love, the Eliana who sought their approval, had died in that kitchen. What remained was a woman who stood in the center of the storm, unbowed and unbroken. I looked at the detective. "I want to file every charge possible," I said. "Identity theft, grand larceny, embezzlement, assault. Make sure the prosecutor knows I am not settling. I want to testify. I want to see them in court." "We will make it happen," the detective promised. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. The nightmare was over. I was an orphan now, by choice and by law, and for the first time in 27 years. I felt completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully free. It has been 6 months since the sirens faded from the suburban street where I grew up. But the silence that has followed is the loudest thing I have ever experienced. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of peace. It is the sound of a phone that does not ring with demands. It is the sound of a mailbox that contains only bills I actually owe and invitations to events I actually want to attend. For the first time in 27 years, the static interference of the Woodcroft family drama has been cut, and the signal of my own life is finally coming through crystal clear. The legal fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely necessary. My lawyer, Evelyn, was a force of nature in the courtroom. She did not just present a case, she dismantled a lifestyle. The audio recording from that night in the kitchen, the one where my parents admitted to forgery, coercion, and the misappropriation of funds, was the nail in the coffin. There was no wiggling out of it. There was no charm offensive that could work on a judge who had heard my mother scream that she stole my identity to save her reputation, because of their advanced age and lack of prior criminal convictions. Robert and Patricia managed to avoid significant prison time. The judge sentenced them to 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. However, the financial penalty was absolute. The court ordered full restitution for the fraudulent loans they had taken out in my name, plus damages for the identity theft. The $75,000 found in the floor safe. The money they had hoarded while watching me struggle. The money that consisted partly of my own stolen childhood savings was seized immediately. It was used to pay off the creditors, clear the fraudulent debts under my name, and cover the legal fees. The irony was poetic. The very nest egg they had destroyed their family to protect was the first thing to go. As for the house, the bank showed no mercy. With my refusal to sign the refinancing agreement and the exposure of their financial insolvency, the foreclosure proceeded at lightning speed. The house was seized and sold at auction last month to a young couple who have no idea about the toxicity that seeped into the drywall. I saw the listing online. They have already painted over the peeling wallpaper in the kitchen. They cut down the overgrown hedges. They erased the Woodcrofts from the map. Julian fared far worse than our parents. The outstanding warrants for check fraud and assault, combined with his confession to the illegal gambling debts involving criminal elements, left the judge with little leniency. He was sentenced to 3 years in a state correctional facility, with mandatory gambling addiction counseling upon his release. The last time I saw him was at the sentencing hearing. He looked at me across the aisle, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his pale skin. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked small. He looked like a child who had finally been told that the game was over. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out of the courtroom. My life in the city has transformed. With the help of the court orders, I scrubbed my credit report clean. The inquiries from the payday lenders were removed. My score rebounded. I changed my phone number, my email address, and even my social media handles. I considered moving to a different city, perhaps Chicago or Seattle, just to put physical distance between myself and the wreckage. But then I realized that running away would be giving them too much power. I loved my job. I loved my apartment. Why should I leave? They were the ones in exile, not me. A few weeks ago, I ran into Aunt Linda at a coffee shop downtown. She was the one who had been the most vocal critic of me before the party, the one who had demanded I pay for the wine. When she saw me, she turned bright red and tried to hide behind a display of muffins. "Eliana," she stammered when I approached her. "I didn't expect to see you." "Hello?" "Aunt Linda," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "How are things?" She looked tired. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. "Things are difficult. You know about your parents?" "I know the legal outcome," I said. "I do not know their living situation. They are living in a one-bedroom apartment on the south side," she said, lowering her voice. "It is not a nice area. The roof leaks. Your father is working as a greeter at a discount store to pay the rent. Your mother, well, she mostly stays inside." She hesitated, looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "They talk about you, you know," she whispered, "every day, to anyone who will listen. The neighbors, the cashier at the grocery store, the mailman. They say you are the devil. They say you tricked them. They say you stole their retirement. They spend all their energy hating you." I took a sip of my coffee. I expected to feel anger. I expected to feel a surge of defensiveness, but instead, I just felt a profound, heavy sadness, not for myself, but for them. They are stuck in a prison of their own making. "Linda," I said softly, "they could have admitted their mistakes. They could have asked for genuine help years ago. Instead, they chose the lie. They are still choosing the lie. That is their punishment. They have to live with themselves." Linda looked down at her hands. "I am sorry, Eliana, for what I said, for the text messages. We didn't know. We believed the image they projected." "I know," I said. "It was a very convincing image. I left her there. I didn't promise to call. I didn't offer to help. I just walked away, back into the sunshine of my own life. And now, here I am. I am sitting in the lounge of the international terminal at the airport. My passport is in my hand, stamped and ready. My suitcase is checked. In an hour, I will be boarding a flight to Italy. I have booked a 2-week tour of the Tuscan wine country. I am going to stay in a villa with a view of the vineyards. I am going to eat pasta made by hand. I am going to breathe air that smells of cypress and sun-baked earth. The trip cost exactly $2,300. It was not a planned budget. It just happened to work out that way. When I saw the total on the travel agency's invoice, I didn't flinch. I laughed. It felt like the universe was giving me a high five. The money that was supposed to buy a few hours of fake glory for a brother who resented me was now buying me 14 days of genuine joy. I signaled the waiter. "I would like a glass of your best Cabernet, please." He poured the wine. It was a deep, rich red, swirling in the crystal glass. It caught the light from the runway, glowing like a ruby. I picked it up, the cool stem resting between my fingers. This was the wine I was supposed to pay for at the Golden Swan. But this glass didn't taste like coercion. It tasted like victory. My phone buzzed on the table. I almost ignored it. Only a few people had my new number. Evelyn, my boss, and my best friend Jessica. But this was an email notification pushing through to my main screen. The sender name was unfamiliar, a string of random numbers and letters from a free, public email service, but the subject line stopped my heart for a beat. Subject: "Please save your brother." I stared at the screen. I knew who it was. It was my father. He must have gone to a public library, created a burner account, and sent this into the void, hoping it would land. I could imagine him sitting there, hunched over a greasy keyboard, typing with his hunt and peck style. I could imagine the content. It would be a guilt trip. It would say that Julian was suffering in prison. It would say they had no food. It would say that if I had a shred of humanity left, I would send money. It would say that I owed them because I was the one who put them there. My thumb hovered over the notification. The old Eliana would have opened it. The old Eliana would have read every poisonous word, letting the guilt seep into her veins like venom. The old Eliana would have wondered if maybe, just maybe, she should send a grocery gift card, just to be the bigger person. But the old Eliana was gone. She had died on that stage at the Golden Swan, buried under a pile of fake money. The woman sitting in the airport lounge took a sip of expensive wine. The tannins were perfect. The finish was smooth. I did not open the email. I did not read the first line. I swiped left. Delete. Then, I went into the settings. Block sender. Report as spam. The notification vanished. The screen was clear again, showing only the background photo, a picture of the Colosseum in Rome, waiting for me. I set the phone down, face down. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that you only get one mother, one father, one brother. They use these words as chains to bind you to people who do not respect you, who do not love you, who see you as nothing more than a resource to be consumed. But as I looked out at the tarmac, watching the planes lift off into the boundless sky, I knew the truth. Family is not DNA. Family is not a shared last name or a history of shared trauma. Family is the place where you are loved without condition. It is the place where you are respected as a human being, not an asset. It is the place where you are safe. If you do not have that, then you do not have a family. You have hostages, you have captors, you have liabilities, and the cost of keeping them? Whether it is $2,300 or $1 million, or just a single penny of your self-worth, it is too expensive. I finished my wine, picked up my bag, and walked toward the gate. They called my flight. I was leaving the country, leaving the continent, leaving the past. I was flying toward a future that belonged only to me, and for the first time in my life, I was flying light, with no extra baggage to weigh me down. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing justice finally served and Eliana reclaiming her life, please take a moment to scroll down and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. Are you listening from London, New York, Sydney, or maybe somewhere quiet and peaceful like Eliana's new life? Let me know. And please, if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel Blue Payback. Hit that like button to support the video, and smash the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people who might need the courage to stand up for themselves. Until next time, remember, your peace is priceless. Don't let anyone discount it.